So this is Jerry Mason, the Kickin Lawyer. And if you just jumped on here, I appreciate it. I am asking that people be directed to the Kickin Lawyer fan page that I created a couple of days ago. What we've done is we're building a full studio out for this to have guests. We got all this professional equipment and whatnot. I have an actual producer over here now that's helping produce it. But the produced version, which is much higher quality, is on the Kickin Lawyer, streams live on the Kickin Lawyer fan page. And, of course, all this stuff's free and stuff. It's for fun more than anything. I figured as a chance to test out some of our new equipment, we could talk about some of the funness that's going on in the world with the Donald and the Twitter bans and all that kind of stuff that's going on. It'd be interesting. As we go through this also, whichever feed you're on, feel free to give me some comments. Like I realize if you're on my Jerry Mason page, the camera quality is probably not as good because I'm just using the computer webcam today, whereas usually I have a little better quality one even when I'm in my office. But we are streaming on these fancier cameras that will be used when we were in the official studio. So if you kick over to the Kickin Lawyer fan page, let me know. I want you guys to give me some feedback on the sound quality. Now, again, if you're looking at the Jerry Mason page, it's just going to be less than good because I don't have anything other than my computer on that one. But on the Kickin Lawyer page, I got these fancy mics and all this fancy sound equipment and lighting and all this stuff, and I'm curious to get your feedback on how that looks. But anyway, so if you're interested in my take on all the stuff that's happened recently, let me start by saying this. So everybody has a right to protest, right? So we have a right to protest. Everyone does. And, oh, by the way, I guess I should back up and say, some of my partners, one in particular, doesn't like when I do these talks, especially on political issues, because we do run several businesses, and, you know, you can really cut your market, so to speak, if you are real open about how you feel on certain political stances. But, you know, so I try to not analyze things really based on politics. I really look at it more based on the law. You know, what does the law say we have the right to do? What does the law say the government can and can't do? When can the government infringe on our rights? Those types of things. So I try to not come at analysis of these types of things from like a left-wing or right-wing perspective. I try to remain really neutral, and which is another thing that I've been discussing with people recently that's real frustrating to me. I feel like, and this is an opinion, I guess, but I feel like, you know, gone are the days of when we had Walter Cronkite or Tom Brokaw or, you know, back in the day when you got actual news. Now, I don't mean that to mean that all the news that we get is fake, but the majority of the news, especially mainstream news media, is swayed. It's spun left or right. And the problem with that is I think it defeats the whole purpose of what media was originally set up for. You know, the whole purpose of media was to give us information so that we, an educated public, could then make our own assessments of how we feel about policies and laws and politicians and events and whatnot. So it's real, I think it's unfortunate, at least from my perception, that's real hard to get. It's really hard to get news. Everything has a spin on it, and so then it makes it difficult, I think, for people to really form their own opinions, because often, even though you don't realize it, the information that you're basing your opinion on is spun. So I just say that because I have a friend, some of you probably know, a very, very, very close friend, who was there in D.C., was it Wednesday? I think it was Wednesday. In D.C. when they had this protest. And this person saw firsthand what did and didn't happen, you know, whether there was or wasn't violence, you know, and of course you've seen things on the media that, you know, clearly show some violence. But I mean, there have been tons of protests over the last year or two from the left and some from the right that had violence, you know, various levels of violence and mayhem. And then, you know, the vast majority of those probably had normal people protesting, you know, following their, enacting their constitutional right to do so. So it's just real frustrating to me now when I have somebody I trust dearly that I know is not lying to me, telling me what happened in Washington, and then when you try to watch, so I just don't watch the news media at all. I don't watch Fox News. I don't watch CNN. I mean, you just can't hardly get any information from them that's accurate. So there's other sources that I personally use for news media, but I'm not going to use this as a platform for those yet. But I want you to keep that in mind. So that's one point was we really don't have any media. And also, I see several of you have jumped on here. If you're on my personal feed, I just remind you again that the personal feed is going to be super low quality. If you go to the Kickin Lawyer fan page, I just started that the last couple of days, and it has the produced feed that's much higher quality. I got a producer over here on it. We're not actually in the studio yet, but we got all the equipment. So we're testing everything out while I did this impromptu law talk. I'm still going to do one tomorrow, but we wanted to test the equipment, and this was something that was really frustrating me, the things that I see on social media and whatnot. All right, so the whole Twitter thing on shutting down the president or anyone else, because I think there was a mass dump from, I think Twitter deleted or either, what do you call it? What's the word that they've been using when people get X'd? You know, they did it to Alex Jones, that guy that was in media, kind of crazy. What is it? What, no, that's one. Permaban. No, I can't remember the term they use for it. Blacklisted or something like that, where they just cut them off. Anyway, they dropped like 4 million accounts or something like that. And what they did is they somehow had an algorithm that went in, and if you supported, I guess, right-wing views, Twitter just cut them off. And then I think Parler, because it got dropped by the algorithm on Amazon or Google or something like that, it gets into tech stuff that I don't know about, and definitely don't want to be part of the problem of spreading misinformation. But the last thing that I saw on Parler is it was struggling because these other platforms, it's what deplatformed, that's what it is. They've basically been deplatformed, just like they did with Trump. So the Parler app, who a lot of the right-wing people went over to, and I'm not on Parler, not for any political reasons, pro or against. It's just there's so much other stuff that I'm on right now. All right, so all that's kind of where we are, and then I've had a lot of people message me and ask, which, I appreciate when you guys ask questions like that. I think and I appreciate that you would respect me as a source to even consider the question. I am definitely not what I think is some super intelligent fella, but I do think that I take pride in at least really analyzing things and then trying to get to the root of if there's an issue or not. And, looking for real facts before I jump to some conclusion. So same thing that I did with the mask, same thing that I did with the COVID vaccine and COVID in general and all this kind of stuff. So when you ask me questions like, can they do that to the president, these type things, I appreciate that you would ask my opinion of that. Just understand that it is an opinion. I'm an attorney, but attorney doesn't mean that I'm super intelligent or whatever. But as you see, I don't mind telling you my opinion. All right. So before we get in, tomorrow I was going to get into the legality of whether these companies can do this, okay, whether they can cut you off of Twitter, cut you off of Facebook or whatever. And then also, again, today I was kind of explaining in the beginning, I had somebody else near and dear to me, a family member, earlier today sent me a picture of something that he had found online and about something that was going to happen, and it was just complete hogwash. But, people see all this stuff, and then they jump to these conclusions. They make an assessment and or just make this initial, oh, no, look, or they'll just read the headline. They don't know any of the facts involved, and they're like, oh, no, we're Trump's staying in office, or Trump's not going to concede, or we're going to war, or we're doing all this kind of stuff, and they don't really have all the information. And then that's what I kind of said in the beginning is, again, part of the problem is even the information you're getting is skewed. So today what I was going to address as far as the Twitter thing is what do we do? As Americans, what are we going to do if you're on the right or the left and you've got big companies that you don't agree with doing things that affect your, for lack of a better term, your rights or your position? Well, one of the things that the most important thing you do, and this is the thing that I think all of us are going to struggle with. Let's say you don't agree with, for example, Twitter, for Twitter taking the president's feed down. Okay, well, the remedy is quit using Twitter. Don't go on Twitter. Don't delete your Twitter account. Don't use Twitter. Same thing with any of these other entities that are doing things you don't like. The dollar speaks much louder at this point in time than really even violence. So I mean, you don't go be violent, and you got a right to protest. But really, I think the modern way to protest the most is to just cease using these businesses. Apple did some similar stuff. So if you're right wing and you're offended by what Apple did, quit buying Apple stuff. Don't buy an Apple, don't buy an iPhone, don't buy a Mac, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I know it's difficult to do, but that's ultimately the only way that we're going to get result, short of there being some real violence, which I want to say that the majority of us don't want. I think that the only people that think that violence is a solution are those extremists on either side. So you've got violent extremists on the left and violent extremists on the right. I think the vast majority of us fall probably in the middle, and none of us rational people think violence is the solution. Now, saying all that, I don't care if in the last year somebody did a protest for Antifa or Black Lives Matter or Trump. It doesn't matter. You got a right to protest. So the people that were there Wednesday, they had a right to be there. Now, did they have a right to go in the Capitol building and vandalize the place? Well, no. Vandalism's against the law. Did they have the right to be in the Capitol building? That doesn't bother me. I tell you one thing that did bother me. See, I haven't really voiced this before, so I don't like the whole kneeling during the anthem, right? I get the whole background on it. I get how they tried to twist the story around and make it be some Black Lives Matter thing, and it wasn't. If you go to the root of it, it wasn't. That's not how it started. It was this. Anyway, I think I already did a law talk on that, and I'm not going to open that can of worms. But it's disrespectful to me, okay? There are men and women that have died for that flag, black, white, purple. I mean, everybody. There's lots of people that have represented your right to be able to do that. Now, is it a form of freedom of speech? Sure. Can you do that? Sure, you can do that. I think it makes you an asshole, excuse my French. But sure, if you want to get on a knee, go ahead and do it. Now, saying that, on the other hand, that dude that went up there wearing that horn head thing, standing at the or the Speaker of the House seat, that's just the same thing to me. That's disrespectful. Why are you going to go and be disrespectful like that? To me, it's no different. So, and I guarantee you, some of them would have fussed just as much about the whole kneeling thing, but yet they're going to go up there and be disrespectful like that. So, do they have the right to do that? Well, you never have the right for vandalism and all this kind of thing. But I do think it's kind of overblown. People like, oh no, they overthrew the Capitol, and no, I know for a fact there were very, very few people that actually went in there. And yeah, I know at least there was the one death, and that was, I think the Capitol Police shot a woman through a door, and there were some other Capitol Police just standing there. And I don't have all the facts on all that, so I don't know exactly what happened once they were all in the Capitol, in the Capitol building. But as far as Americans going to the Capitol, which we pay for, and protesting, sure you can do that. No different than if Antifa or Black Lives Matter or any of these left-wing groups want to go and protest. They can do that. That's fine. Now, is violence okay? No. I don't think violence is ever okay. I think that, well, I should rephrase that. There are times when violence is unfortunately appropriate. But I think that wise people know that that's never the means to change people's minds. The only time that again, I don't want to get too deep in the political spectrum here, but, historically, yeah, I'm going to be straight with you. If somebody is violating my constitutional rights, and it gets, you circle all the way back. People don't want to talk about, the Civil War and things like that. Well, the Civil War initially was about states' rights. Now, yes, slavery was a huge component of that. It was. And obviously slavery is a black eye that we have to live with to this day. But the Civil War originally was states' rights. And then if you go even further back than that, to the American Revolution, why did we rebel against Britain? And that was over something even way less egregious. It was over taxes. It was really over tea tax. And so then you fast forward, these same Americans, our ancestors, my own ancestor, George Mason, who was alive back then, you fast forward, here we are a couple hundred years later, and people are like, oh no, I can't believe they would do this. I mean, we're a nation of rebels as it is. We're all about our individual liberties. And kind of the cornerstone of capitalism and everything is our individual civil liberties. And so if any entities, whether it's governments or from some people's perception, companies, infringe on those civil liberties, people get upset, and they got a right to get upset. Now, again, should they resort to violence? No, the Capitol people weren't coming to their houses and taking any of their stuff. So, if you're not coming to me, there's no reason for me to bring violence to you, if that makes sense. So, and it goes the same way whether it's the left or the right. So obviously I like to think it's middle ground opinions on that kind of stuff. But the whole point of today's talk was really for you guys to see, at least from my perspective, that the only way for any of these companies to hear you today, the real method of protest, is don't buy any of their stuff. So same thing if you're left-leaning. If you're left-leaning and you don't agree with Fox News, for example, well, don't watch Fox News. Don't share Fox News stuff. Don't look at Fox News's feeds. Don't look at any of that stuff. That's really the only way nowadays we can protest. And then one last point I was going to make is I've made some new resolutions personally this year to be more efficient. Trying to get up earlier, be more efficient in the morning. And one thing I'm also trying to do is I'm trying to not scroll through feed. I don't want to waste my time with negativity. And, there are some people on, social media that are positive, but, the vast majority of it's pushed to you through algorithms that's going to try to get some reaction from you. They want you to stay on those social media platforms. So how are they going to do that? They're going to feed you things that, get an emotional response. So if you're, right-leaning or left-leaning, you're going to get stuff to the extremes of each of that and stuff that's going to enrage you and inflame you. And so I just don't like being manipulated by anything, social media, the left, the right, anybody, number one. Number two, it's a waste of time. We can only control what we do and how we react to what other people do to us. That's it. That's all you can control. You can't control, huge corporations. Not at least individually. You can't control, what the politician's going to do. They're going to do what they're going to do either way. So you go vote. That's the way you start with some control. You vote, or you don't support these companies. These companies have really become more powerful than government in a lot of ways, and they manipulate government too. And then via social media now, they're manipulating us. They're making us think that our neighbor is our enemy. I've got neighbors on both sides of me that are very left-wing and very right-wing. You know what I mean? And they're great people. I like them all. They're great. Black people, white people, purple people. There's all kinds of folks that I think are great people that think differently than me. They're not my enemy. All right, so, and this is something I was going to get into tomorrow, but I'll just drop this hint today, and then you guys can watch it tomorrow. And again, if you're just now coming in, I would ask that you go like the Kickin Lawyer fan page, because that's where the produced podcast is. It's much more professional, better sound, better lighting, all that kind of stuff. This is just on my computer feed. But, we as Americans have got to do better. We've got to do better and realize that it's not a right-left thing, okay? We're Americans. All of us are Americans, all right? And just because somebody voted for Trump doesn't make them a racist, and just because somebody voted for Biden doesn't make them a socialist. It's just they have different views and different beliefs, and that's what makes the world go around. And quite frankly, I think it would be I wouldn't want to live in a world where we didn't have options like that. That's basically fascism, and that's not something that interests me. So I'm glad that we can have diverse ideas. What we have to do, though, is step back and listen to both sides, listen to each other, and then that's where you find the middle ground. I do mediations as an attorney. And basically what a mediator does is you go in and you listen to both sides, and then you help negotiate an agreement. You have to get an agreement between the two. And what I've found is in mediation and in sales, and all the sales that I do, is it's all basically sales. You're trying to close the agreement or close the sale. And the key to all of that is that you've got to be able to understand both perspectives, and often you have to help the other side understand the other perspective. And if they're not actually listening and open-minded at the table, it's not going to happen. You don't get an agreement or middle ground or any compromise worked out if both sides are just fighting amongst each other. This is not a left-right thing, okay? We're all Americans, and so we've got to do better as Americans. This is very frustrating to me, this whole infighting, this whole pointing finger, this, we're going to impeach Trump again. I mean, dude's fixing to be gone, and Biden's fixing to come in, and I'm going to support him as president. I mean, I believe, was there any corruption in the election? Was there, was the election results falsified at all? Well, sure there was some. There's always been some. They've had dead people voting in elections for 100 years. I mean, there's definitely some corruption in there. The question isn't, there is some. The question is, was there enough to overthrow this election? And I don't think there was. I just personally don't think that there was enough. I mean, maybe, was there enough evidence of it? I think there's probably more chance of that 100 years ago when it was all paper ballots. I would like to think that nowadays there's more checks and balances on it. But, I'm optimistic, and I have a lot of faith in our system, and, it is what it is. So ultimately, though, you don't have to like the person, but you got to respect the office. So if you're right-leaning and you're, Biden's going to be the death of us and all this, that's not true. It's not how it's going to go. It's just not. You can check on me in 4 years and see, but we're going to survive Biden just like we survived Trump, just like we survived all the rest of them. It'll be okay. One good thing about our system of government, and I can do a video on this in the future, our system of government is very stable. And that's part of the reason why our economy has always prospered, is because business likes stability. And our government is very stable. And the reason it's stable is because it's super hard to get anything done. Anybody that gets in that office, the presidential office or in legislature, man, it's just tooth and nail to try to get anything passed, and then they go through these rounds on, I did a talk on that one time, on how they go through the rounds on evaluating these bills, and they put them to committees, and then they edit them, and they go back, and by the time it gets to the president's desk, it's not anything near what it was initially. So, I mean, it's very hard to get stuff done in government. And so we got a stable platform. Now, here's where the instability comes in. Us people. If we, as citizens, keep buying into this bread and circuses thing that's getting thrown at us, whether it's by the government or corporations or both, or foreign governments, I don't know, you just can't buy into this negativity. And when I say bread and circuses, what I mean is when in Rome, when the people would start to get upset about something, like let's say they were frustrated with something that the emperor had done, or they'd been at war a long time and they were tired of it, or maybe they had a bad season and they didn't have food like they wanted. The emperor, what they would do, the emperors would order games. They would have festivals and gladiatorial combat, and it'd be like the equivalent of having a big Super Bowl or something nowadays. And they'd feed them. They give them all this bread and all this food, and they throw food out there. And all they did was appease them. It was a temporary appeasement, but what would happen is the masses would focus on the bread and circuses and completely miss the big picture of what was actually going on. And the next thing you know, you got politicians that have been in office for 40 or 50 years, and people don't realize that they're just as at fault for the situation as they were 40 years ago. And it's because they get these distractions. Well, what better bread and circuses do we have than social media nowadays? And some of you guys just feed into it, just add fodder to it. And it's so frustrating. So I post a lot of stuff on here because I got a couple of platforms that just auto post stuff. I've got 2 companies and now a marketing director that pushes all this stuff. So half the time I don't even know that it's been posted, because I don't sit there and scroll through the thing. I don't look at who's liking it. I don't look at who's doing all the comments, all that. I got people that help me with all that stuff now. And I'm not saying that that's special or fancy, but my point is, like, I know y'all see me on social media and you're like, well, you're saying don't look at it, but you do. And I mean, if you don't look at it, then that kind of hurts me, because a lot of my businesses run through social media. But my point is, like, you can't let that influence you. You can't let that make your day negative. You can't let that make you go home and you be in a crappy mood for your family, because that's what's important, is your wife and kids, or husband and kids, whatever it is. When you go home, the family network, those are the people that matter. Not necessarily that big a deal who the president is, who went to Washington, who went to Memphis, who went to whatever. That's what you've got to kind of focus on. So we just got to do better as Americans. You got to do better at focusing on what's really important, and not letting social media or any of this bread and circuses stuff get the better of you. All right, so one last time, I'm going to make the call that if you haven't liked the Kickin Lawyer fan page, please do so. We're going to do one of the podcasts tomorrow, the Law Talk, like I normally do on Tuesdays. We were trying to do this one just sort of impromptu to test out my equipment. I got my producer over here, Josh. You can switch the camera over there and wave at him. And again, if you can't see that double camera feed, we actually got several cameras. It's because you're on my personal page, and this is all going to be set up through the Law Talk's going to be moving over to the Kickin' Lawyer fan page. So I appreciate you watching either way. Let me see if I got any comments I need to respond to. What about martial law? That's a good question. Look at that mic. I got to have a gold mic. Why does it keep stopping? Mama, it's because you got bad internet. That's why. Every time you're talking about it stopping, that's because you got bad internet. All of those companies. That is correct, Mr. Randy. If you don't agree, that's what you got to do. Of course, he thinks that the correct wings. That's the wrong way to think. Do you think the Democratic Party put in play Democrats as Republicans so they would flip later so they could overturn votes against Trump? So Ms. Sherry asked that question, so I'll respond to that real briefly. So y'all are going to hate this, okay? You Republicans are going to hate this. Donald Trump is a Democrat. They're going to hate that. If you look at Donald Trump's voting history, Donald Trump is a Democrat, okay? He's giving money to both sides because he's a businessman and he's playing both sides. I get it. But generally in the past, he voted for Democrats. Now, does that make him a terrible person? No. Does that mean he's not a Republican now? No. People change. I think he's a legitimate Republican. I think that he really does share a lot of the modern Republican Party views. But she asked me if I think the Democrats put Republicans in to push that agenda. You know, I don't know. I guess I give you my personal opinion. I think that would be difficult to do. And the reason is the Republican machine has got a lot of money behind it, just like the Democratic Party has a lot of money behind it. And those two conventions, I would think it would be difficult to sneak through there and not actually be allied with their ideals. So I'm not going to say that it doesn't happen, you know, but I don't think it's like I just don't really believe in this. And again, I got another partner who does, but I don't believe there's like a group of people that are pulling the levers and controlling the world, so to speak. I'm much more optimistic. I think that we can, as citizens, really not manipulate, but control the outcome of things for ourselves. And I don't like the idea of that mass manipulation like that, you know. But I think it also circles back, Ms. Sherry, to a good point, is you need to know your politicians. You know, so I mean, if you know that they were born here, they're raised here, they voted like this, they did this, this is the way they think, this is what they've done, and then you know who you're voting for, I think it's much harder to have some kind of fraud like that where they're pretending one thing but they intend something else, you know. So again, I'm not going to say that it wouldn't happen or couldn't happen. I just find it difficult. I think it would be difficult for a Democrat or a Republican to act like the other party and get elected under that platform because there's so much money behind those parties. They're not going to waste money on somebody that doesn't think the way they do. That's about what I got here. All right, you got anything over there, Josh?
Nope, I think we're all good.
Okay, all right. Well, that's about 30 minutes in. Again, please give me your feedback, especially if you go over to the Kickin' Lawyer page and give me some comments. I'm getting static on my end here if you're on the Kickin' Lawyer fan page, and I want to make sure you guys don't hear that static that's coming through. We're trying to work the kinks out in all this audio as we move over to our studio. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch. We got a lot of big things planned this year for you, especially on this the Kickin' Lawyer Law Talk. We're going to try to do it twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesdays will either be me alone or with one guest, and then Thursdays will be like, I guess, a free-for-all with the partners. So it should be a lot of fun. Please go to the Kickin' Lawyer fan page, like that, follow it so you can see when I'm live on it. And feel free to share and like all this stuff. So I say do all that after I said don't use social media. So you're going to use it anyway. So just go ahead and support the stuff. All right. Well, you guys have a good day. I'll talk to you later.
3, 2,